Hello, friends. Hope we're doing well. Gonna let everybody keep getting in here, but it's officially official. Lane Kiffin to LSU. Uh, I apologize if I am not able to get back to your text messages, phone calls. Obviously, this is a hectic time, a lot to talk about. I will also say I will be hopping on here later on live with Cameron Larkin and Russ Edens to discuss some more things. But this is an unprecedented time. Um, the fact that you have a head coach that is in the midst of an 11-1 season, in the midst of hosting a college football playoff, and then abruptly is gone, before the postseason even starts. And there are a lot of engines behind that story. There are a lot of things to talk about in that notion, and there's so much to break down. But I think it's very important to note this: Pete Golding is the permanent head coach for the Ole Miss Rebels. It was announced by multiple sources today. And while we were outside waiting on some of the news to figure out about Lane Kiffin outside of the facilities, but Ole Miss wasted no time. And honestly, I don't think they had much of a choice after this saga had kind of been drawn out and moved for such a long time. They missed out on, I'm sure, on some of the coaching candidacies that they wanted to be in contact with in terms of John Summerall from Tulane and Alex Golesh from USF. But seemingly they got their guy. And it's funny in a sense because I remember Pete Golding speaking to the media throughout fall camp and basically coming out and saying that, he never had any desire to be a head coach. Excuse me, I'm trying to get everything set up on my phone. But what was initially funny about it all is in the midst of this, you either thought it was going to be Pete Golding or, you know, Joe Judge, who were, I think, the highest candidacies for those moments. But you also look at it in the fact that how does Joe Judge and whatever offensive staff is left? Because presumably from my nature at the moment, Joe Judge is the only offensive staff member still here, still with the Ole Miss program as of now. I believe that John Garrison, the offensive line coach, is gone. Kevin Smith, the running back coach, is gone. McDowell, the wide receivers coach, is gone, and a plethora of other guys that are also in the mix for different roles. So how does that moment still get trickled down? I'm not sure. I really am not. And I think what's also important is that you look at the longer stale of things. What does Ole Miss do now? In terms of recruiting, there's always that mix of can teams recruit at the highest level when a coach leaves. Ole Miss has already lost a commit from a high school guy. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but it's all so much, man. And what was funny about the whole situation today is the players were were active. They were positive. There was no ill will in terms of immediately after them leaving the facility. And I thought that was important to note that once you get things moving with the right guys and with the right staff, anything is possible. It is. And no matter who's at the helm, no matter who recruited those guys, anything is possible. And if you look at the notion that Lane Kiffin set, sure, he was a heck of a coach. And he created a great staff, but I will give him props for that, creating a great staff that was able to keep the mindset of these guys stable throughout the situation. This could have easily been a 2022 situation. And this could have easily been a moment where you look at some of the collapses that happened in 2022 after the LSU loss. They go to Texas A&M and survive a scare. Uh, then they drop a hard game to Bama 22. They drop a hard Egg Bowl loss. They really collapse in the end of that season. They get blown out in Fayetteville. They lose the Texas Bowl to Texas Tech. It seemingly seemed like a different situation here with this moment. And I don't know if that's a personnel issue, a player issue, but there are also very few people that were still a part of that 2022 team that were still here. There's Jaden Williams and I'm sure a few other guys, but very few. What did Ole Miss learn from that time to now? I'm not sure what interpersonally. I'm not, in the mix of those conversations, but I do know this. Keith Carter sat down with Lane Kiffin as well as Chancellor Glenn Boyce. And Lane Kiffin wanted to keep coaching this team throughout the season and throughout the postseason. Keith Carter denied that. And I have much respect for Keith Carter for standing his ground and understanding what is the best situation for the University of Mississippi. And they've already been put in a bind. The fact that they were pushed out of this coaching carousel because they were never given an answer until today. The fact that the calendar months of the college football playoff will then initiate into the points of the transfer portal and when it closes and the start of the next semester for colleges. But I think it's important to remember this too. Uh, how vital can Ole Miss be in the playoffs with Pete Golding, with the defensive staff being retained, with Joe Judge, who seemingly needs to now figure out who he's going to hire for that part of the staff. And I say that because we don't know, technically speaking, if Charlie Watts Jr. is still at Ole Miss or not. I would assume he's gone to LSU with Lane Kiffin, and that presumably would leave Joe Judge to, I would assume, some type of play calling duties. And now I would assumably be on him to make those decisions in terms of who to hire for position groups. It was told to us while we were waiting outside the practice facilities today that no media availability would be given to us, and coaches and players would have position groups. But I guess the coaches there were still there, which is important to lean on as well. I think. There are so many things to talk about, and I hate that we're even having this conversation. The Sunday after the Egg Bowl and 11-1 season, uh, but this shouldn't be a conversation. This shouldn't be a moment. This shouldn't be an impromptu thing. We should be celebrating these players. We should be celebrating this staff, and we're not. And it's a sickening feeling. Uh, and I want to say I'm shocked, but at the same time, I'm not. We've seen this happen before with Lane Kiffin. We've seen the history that he has, the resume that he's shown. And as a person that goes to Ole Miss, a person that is around Ole Miss fans, you would have liked to think that things have changed. As someone that's now he's 50 years old, he's been through the carousel of leaving Tennessee for USC and that not working out for him. The mess of going to Alabama, but then being hired for the FAU job and not being able to coach in the national championship game. There are so many things that you would think at this moment he's learned from, but it showcased that none of that really mattered to him. But I'm not going to put words in his mouth. I'm not going to do that. I just do know this. He's gone to LSU. The news was he told offensive staff members that either you follow me to LSU today or you're not coming at all. I think that's a weird situation. There was obviously an ultimatum that was put out by Keith Carter a few weeks ago saying that he had to make a decision before the Egg Bowl. That did not happen. But that's seemingly an ultimatum made by Lane Kiffin to his coaching staff, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They had to stay. They either had to make a decision today and either go or leave. It was also reported because of that LSU really wanted to keep Baker and the LSU defensive staff, who have done a pretty good job recruiting and have had good moments this season on the field as well. But the players, man, they really were in an uproar. And you have to think that they were prepared for this. I think most people were prepared. There was a reason that he had not given Ole Miss an answer in terms of he was staying for a reason. I think the players knew this, staff knew this, administrative knew this, fans knew this, media members knew this. It was just, when was this officially going to be announced? It was announced today. But I think people knew that because he had not announced that he was staying, he wasn't going to stay. You look at Kurt Signet in Indiana, he announced he wanted to stay. They got the deal wrapped up. You look at Mike Elko at Texas A&M, he announced he wanted to stay. They got the deal wrapped up. You look at other guys throughout the country. I can't think of Georgia Tech's head coach off the top of my head, but he wanted to stay at Georgia Tech. He got the deal wrapped up. There are so many guys throughout this coaching carousel this season. You look at Clark Lee of Vanderbilt, and I'm thinking of guys as I continue talking, but there are guys throughout this country that have been lured by other schools and have presumably told their schools, told their players, I'm here. I'm here to stay. My job is not finished here. My duty is not finished. My relationship with you guys is too important for that. And that just was not the case with Lane Kiffin. It's just hard to fathom all of it, honestly, because of that. You look at some of the motions, you look at some of the conversations, the E60 documentary. We've continued to hear from Lane Kiffin that he needed Oxford a lot more than it needed him. Uh, what does that say about his long-term stay? I do not know, and obviously it did not mean much because he's gone. But I thought that meant that things were changing. He was looking at life differently. He was taking things one day at a time. He was in his sobriety journey. He was learning how to be adaptive in such a slow moving environment, and wanted to be something that Ole Miss had never had before. And I think that's a difference that a lot of people are not understanding is number one, Lane Kiffin had the opportunity to do something that has never been done at Ole Miss. And it's cool to be able to go do that at LSU. You know, you have the historic contacts, you have the national championships, you have the Heisman trophies, you have the SEC championships, you have the 92 plus thousand stadium capacity. It's great, correct. But what the thing of matter is this, you're not going to be able to go down the same way you could at Ole Miss. And I also think it's important to note that he could possibly do the same thing to LSU. I've wholeheartedly believed that Alabama job has always been the marquee job for him. You know, if that opportunity came down the road for him, who knows what he would do. Um, it's a very weird situation, though. It is. You think from the moment that I walked into fall camp before the season started, if you would have told me at this point that this would be happening and that Lane Kiffin would be the head coach at LSU, I would have called you crazy. I would have. Because there were no parable thoughts that was even going to happen. I thought that Brian Kelly was going to have a successful year with the number one transfer portal class in the country, Gary Nussmeier returning. I know they had problems with losing a lot of guys on their offensive line, and the run game was still looking icky before the season started. But I thought they were going to be able to do damage, especially after the first game of the season where they went to Clemson and, didn't have the greatest offensive performance, but they won the game. And, kind of erase that history of losing their first game of the season for like 3 straight years. It's just a crazy time. It really is. But you had to see this coming in some sort of manner if you're an Ole Miss fan. He was being poached around a lot from other schools. Obviously, Florida and Florida fans had a lot to say throughout the moments where Billy Napier was fired, even before then. But there was so much going out throughout the season that you were in the midst of just trying to enjoy the moment, enjoy the 11-1 season, but you weren't able to do that if you're an Ole Miss fan now. And it's unfair to fans, it's unfair to administration, and it's unfair to the players. The players really reacted well, came out and, some said hotty toddy. Bryson Sanders came out and said, look, we're going to go win a natty. Others, came out and said Pete is the guy, et cetera, et cetera. Others were quiet. I'm not going to depict what I have, talked about with players on this team. But the goal remains the same for some of these players. Win a national championship at Ole Miss and compete at the highest level. To do that, my fear is that the College Football Committee playoff will look at this and try to remove Ole Miss without a doubt from this scenario. I think it is impossible to do that, but I would not be surprised. I've seen the committee do some crazy things this year in terms of rankings. I've seen them do some crazy things in terms of Final Four rankings to end seasons over the years. And Ole Miss is not the national brand that some of these other schools are, and it's just as simple as that. And when you look at the notion that they have the ability to do something like this, I wouldn't be as surprised if the football committee really jumped on it. So I really want to reiterate how important that is. And honestly, I'm glad this is over. And I'm looking at your comments now. Thank you, Mary. I'm glad this is over. This is unnecessary. This was handled poorly from Lane Kiffin, in my opinion. This was a situation where a lot of people throughout his peers and a lot of LSU people truly believe that he should be allowed to coach throughout the season. I disagree for a plethora of reasons. But the biggest is you cannot have and I get this. Some people, like Alex Golish, have the right, like Deion Sanders a few years ago at Jackson State to go to Colorado, have the ability to continue coaching throughout the season and finish what they've started. But this is just simply not the same situation, and it's not for a lot of reasons. This is Ole Miss, and this is LSU. I'd argue Ole Miss and LSU hate each other more than any other schools. I'd argue, Ole Miss hates LSU more than they hate Mississippi State or Arkansas. I'd argue LSU fans hate, Ole Miss more than they hate Alabama or Arkansas, or whoever you would consider your biggest rivals. I would consider this Ole Miss LSU rivalry to be the deepest it has been in a long, long time, and that's because both programs have been in the midst of successful stints, and is now just going to take over even crazier now that Lane Kiffin is the head coach of the LSU Tigers. You have to be the guy to look at the calendar next year as well. LSU comes back to Oxford next year. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head. But LSU comes into Oxford next year, and I've seen some conversations between Ole Miss and Tennessee fans trying to figure out which scenario was worse. I mean, they're honestly really bad. I get the perspective that Tennessee's worse. He was there for years, said all these things about Florida. I wanted to come in and change the program, and poof, he's gone. But then I look at it the Ole Miss perspective as well. Poof, he's gone. You know, after the 2022 season, you thought this would be put to bed. You think, situations like this would have been handled better. And as well, it's not like Ole Miss is struggling. They're 11-1. He has all the job security in the world. It's been reported that the offer would be matched by Ole Miss in terms of the $90 million that LSU offered him. It's not like he hasn't been competing with guys in the portal in high school with NIL. That's not the case at all. Now, there are some foundations that are really important to understand in terms of Lane Kiffin's complained about, fan supported games sometimes, which is understandable. And I think sometimes primarily from the student perspective, which I think there are a lot of things that go into that in terms of the location of the student section of Vaught Hemingway Stadium, prices, buying tickets and not showing up or selling them to people that want to show up. There are a plethora of reasons for that. But I simply cannot imagine the internal reason of why Lane Kiffin would take this job. I think he had it made at Ole Miss. He went 9-3 in the regular season last year, 10-3 overall, with the greatest assembled team in Ole Miss history, supposedly. And he goes to the Gator Bowl. And no Ole Miss no Ole Miss fans felt he deserved to be on the hot seat. Let me make this clear. If he goes to LSU and does that consistently, he will be on the hot seat. The goal of LSU is to win a national championship. You have to understand something that Brian Kelly arrived in 2022, went to the SEC championship game his first year. Second year in 2023, they still won 10 games, didn't make it to the conference championship game, but they had a Heisman Trophy winner. In 2024, the same thing. I believe they either won 9 or 10 games, had successful stints, but simply just was not getting over the hump. Lane Kiffin cannot do that at LSU, or he will be out of a job within the next few years. And it's as simple as that. You can recruit at a high level, just like Brian Kelly did, just like coaches before Brian Kelly did. But if you do not win on a consistent basis, and it's not only just winning, it's continuing the narrative of making LSU a national brand. It's continuing the narrative of making LSU as prominent and popular and effective as it can be. I think Lane Kiffin can do that, but the moment he does it, I think you put yourself in the same bind again that he was once in when he left Tennessee for USC. Where do you go from that? I'm just not sure. I'm really not. But I will say this. This is a group of players at Ole Miss. They understand the task at hand. This is still a great staff around them, and they still have the opportunity to do something that has never been done before. I think, the motions that they were distracted or were not distracted this week is something internally we will never know, unless you're a player or close family or friend member to these players at this time. That's just something we simply will not ever know. But it looked like they were focused Friday against Mississippi State. That's a state team that has caused a lot of problems for some teams throughout the season. Even though they have lost a lot of those games, they've caused a lot of problems. They did not cause Ole Miss many problems come the last quarter of the game. There was back and forth in the first half, but Ole Miss cemented themselves as being the more dominant team at that point of the game. Ole Miss is going to be ready. Pete Golden is going to be ready. I'm very excited and interested to see what they do with the rest of the offensive staff now. But this is a coaching carousel that I will remember forever. The fact that I've been able to live out this moment and talk about this moment and be in the midst of it is crazy. But it's also kind of sad. I really just wanted to focus on football. Ole Miss has the opportunity to do something very unprecedented and change the national landscape of what Ole Miss is. And it's been overtaken by this situation with Lane Kiffin. Ole Miss could not wait to after the season to do this. They could not. Keith Carter could not do that. They could not allow that for a plethora of reasons. And I get why people, may have concerns of saying, why not just let him coach? You just could not. You simply could not. And it's not, it's a pride thing, but it's also a calendar thing. It's a money thing. It's a futuristic thing. It's a relationship thing. It's a recruiting thing. And you could not allow that to happen if you're Ole Miss. I will say I will be back on here later on this evening with Cameron Larkin and Russ Edens. But there's so much to talk about. Trey Collins decommitted from Ole Miss, the 4-star safety from Ridgeland, Mississippi. You may expect some of those other guys to decommit as well, but I also wouldn't be surprised if a plethora of guys stay. I think that Lane Kiffin is a heck of a recruiter. But I think especially on that defensive side of the ball, Pete Golding has specifically been recruiting those guys. His staff, Randall Joyner, Wes Neighbors, et cetera, have been recruiting those guys. Offensive side of the ball is where it gets a little bit more tricky. You hope Joe Judge, with his NFL experience and his recruiting abilities, with the relationship he has with Arthur Simmons and Trinidad Chambers, will be able to secure some guys as well to stay in Oxford. But it's easy to linger guys away to go to LSU. It really is. So we'll see how this all continues to unfold. Check the Riverwalk out. They will and myself will continue to keep you updated there. Ben Garrett, Jake Thompson, Michael Katz, Sam Hutchins, Brad Logan, Tyler Combs, Neil McCready, Chase Parham. Those are the guys also covering Ole Miss to the T. Marty, hope you get some sleep, man. Hope you get some food, man. You've been through the trenches over the last 48, 24 hours, man. Hope you get some rest, man. You deserve it. There's a crazy, unprecedented time. I just wanted to come up here, talk about a few things a little bit more. I'll be back on here later on with a few buds this evening to kind of be more in depth and hear different perspectives and have more conversations about this. So appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow us on all social media platforms, leave a like, comment as well. What are your thoughts about Lane Kiffin LSU? Do you think Ole Miss can be successful with Pete going against the head coach this season in the postseason, but as well moving forward? And what are your thoughts about, what Lane Kiffin can do at LSU? Do you think he can win a national championship? Do you think he can get over that hump? Love to hear you guys' opinions, and we'll talk about that in our later segment. That should be around 5:30, 6 o'clock p.m. So we'll keep you guys updated, but appreciate you guys tuning in. Sign out.